So, hello, Ricardo. It's lovely to meet you.
Nice meeting
Yeah.
you, Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming and joining us today. So, to be blunt, wants to know all about your documentary with the
Mhm.
late Larry Smith, unfortunately. Do you want to just tell me how Ride with Larry came about?
Yes, I also have a personal story with Parkinson's because my grandfather on my father's side had Parkinson's as well. And
Mhm.
so I felt that there was not a lot known of Parkinson's. There's a lot of stigmas. A lot of people do not understand Parkinson's. And so people that suffer with Parkinson's have a hard time, well, being out in the public, being stigmatized because of their movements and the way they conduct themselves. And
Mm.
so in 2003, I met Larry Smith at some event in San Diego. And I remember that he told me that one of his dreams would be to ride across the country, the United
Mm.
States, from, the coast to coast. And so that stuck in my mind. I was not working on a documentary at the time. I was going to start another documentary that was more of a historical nature, the history of Los Angeles and California.
Mm.
And when I was done with that project, I remember I was like, okay, what would be the next project? And I had Larry Smith in my mind. And so I contacted him and I was like, Larry, I would love to do something with Parkinson's. And I remember that you said you wanted to ride coast to coast. So how are you doing with that? I would love to do a documentary of kind of like your story and how you're dealing with Parkinson's and how cycling is just so powerful for you. And at that time, his Parkinson's had progressed to a point where he's like, you know what, I can no longer do coast to coast. And he was an avid cyclist. I mean, he rode very long distances, but at that time, his Parkinson's had just advanced so much, and he's like, I just can't do it. And so but then it was like, okay, maybe the distance is not so important, but the message. What distance can you possibly do? And by then he was living in South Dakota, which is in the Midwest, north part of the United States. And he's like, well, I could probably cross the state of South Dakota. And let's just do it. The distance, I mean, it's 300 miles.
Mm.
Maybe not so much for someone for a professional cyclist, obviously, but someone with advanced Parkinson's. I mean, that's kind of a challenge. And so, let's just go ahead and do it. And he was open to that. At the beginning, what was interesting is that Larry was not very open to the idea of medical marijuana at first. I mean, the
Okay.
documentary was not going to have that part. He was a former police officer, so he was
Mhm.
not very comfortable with the idea of with his professional background and now using marijuana publicly. And especially because in South Dakota it was not legal at the time. And
Mhm.
so, well, we were like, let's just go ahead. um, and later on in the film, I mean, when we were going to start editing, Larry's Parkinson's again advanced to a point that he called us and he was like, you know what, I'm open to the idea of trying medical marijuana. I'm at the top of everything I can possibly take as a Parkinson's patient. He was taking like 20 something pills a day. He had a double deep brain stimulation, the DBS in his brain. He's like, there's nothing else. So my last resort is medical marijuana. And that's when the most important part of the film now, when people think about the film, is that part that it's just so convincing of him trying
Mm.
medical marijuana.
Obviously, because of his muscles in his face, and he's not able to smile like throughout the film or to show his
Yeah.
expressions that well. And
Hmm.
the bit that really got to me when I was watching the documentary was the second that the marijuana hits and he starts to relax, this smile that you don't see throughout the whole film just lights up his face.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, it was so quick. And you almost feel the relief for him for stopping shaking. So obviously this was a really personal connection with you and obviously your family background. Did you have any knowledge of using sports and also medical marijuana when you previously to meeting Larry?
I did not have an opinion. I mean, not
Mhm.
in favor or against my. But when I was filming that part, when he tried it for the first time, I was holding the camera, and I remember just being behind the camera and just seeing that, so quick response to. I was blown away. I was like, wow, that for me did it. I'm totally convinced and in favor of this. I mean, if something can do, bring so much relief and increases quality of life to someone like Larry, like why would anyone be opposed to that? And of course, when we presented at film festivals, we got depending on the place. Actually, of course, when we presented at San Francisco Film Festival, no issue. There was no one against that. But in some places in Mexico, there were people that were opposed to that. And at the end, we're like, well, the typical comment was, but marijuana doesn't cure Parkinson's. And we were like, well, of course it doesn't cure Parkinson's. And nothing cures Parkinson's right now, but there's some medications that are legal that they can take and bring comfort. And marijuana, of course, it doesn't cure Parkinson's, but it increases the quality of life. And for someone like Larry, and for people that are facing an illness in such a way, anything helps. If it's a treatment that makes them feel better, they can give them a quality of life where they can talk to people, where they can, conduct themselves, walk to places. I mean, why wouldn't you allow that? And that's the whole thing of prohibiting. It's also brings another obstacle that then education institutions or research institutions are blocked from funding to study cannabis more and what it can do. But for the most part, when we presented at festivals, most people, the reaction was like, I used to be against this, but you show such a strong, convincing argument that I have changed my mind.
Yeah, a lot of what it is around marijuana being like such a taboo, especially in England, is conducted to show us like stoners as lazy, it doesn't help anyone. But seeing like videos like this, like Larry Smith, I remember when you did the documentary and that snippet of him coming round and being relaxed was on social media and stuff, and it completely changed my perspective. I wasn't necessarily had an opinion on it. I was young at the time, but I remember thinking, wow, that it has so much potential to unlock. And really all it is there's no education around it. The research needs the funding, with legalization. If we do that, then pharmaceutical companies can look into the cannabinoids and what different strains can help different things. I mean, everyday things are coming out. It's just not getting enough recognition, unfortunately, because there is still a massive negative aspects around it. But hopefully with things like your film, with the documentary with Larry, and more people coming out, because obviously he left such a legacy for other people with Parkinson's and other diseases like multiple sclerosis, to come out and to try these things, and states are legalizing one after the other.
Yeah, completely. And that's part of his legacy. It was very interesting that at the time when he was trying this, he had to move to California to have access to medical marijuana because it was not legal in his state of South Dakota. And last November, we had elections in the country, as the whole world knows, but it was not only to vote for president. A lot of states had their own local elections. And in South Dakota, people voted to legalize marijuana. And they used the people that were campaigning for this were using Larry and his message. And so it's, in a way, it's kind of like a weird moment because Larry did not get to see it, but he was part of it. And so now it's legal in South Dakota, which is a very conservative state in the US, but people are seeing things differently. And documentary was used also in Florida years ago, before it was legal in Florida. They used the documentary. The people that campaigned for it passed. In states like Ohio as well. We presented at the Cleveland International Film Festival, and there was a group that was campaigning for that. They came, support the film, use our film for their cause. The first election didn't pass. They tried it again 2 years later, and it did pass. So that's part of his legacy. Other countries have also used it. I mean, like you said, the image associated with people that smoke or try marijuana are, the stoners. They don't think of someone like Larry Smith. That was a former police officer, police captain, actually. They don't think of someone like him needing it. And so I think that was also one of the convincing parts of the film, that it's all of a sudden this 60-something-year-old person who was a police officer trying it is like, oh, wait a second. So this there's more than just the stoners or the typical image, the Rastafarian kind. Yeah.
To see what he left behind, obviously, just to add with the medical marijuana side of it, because I know he said he didn't want to try it initially, but it obviously was on the table. Did you expect anything like it?
Well, in the film, we did try. I mean, we were just hoping. I hope he changes his mind, because I mean, the film was still going to be inspirational, but we were, the team working, behind the scenes. We were like really, really hoping and lobbying with his wife, and like, just give it a try. I think that it could help him. I mean, with everything that he has, this could be something really good. And when we finally got him, it was really, really fantastic. And then after that, I mean, we have supported locally in California companies that produce CBD oil. Actually, the company that manufactured the one that Larry uses in the film, we've been in touch with them. They have grown their company, and the owner of that company has a true reason to provide a benefit for people, because his sister had cancer and he developed this CBD oil combination with a half ratio with THC, and it helped her a lot in the last months of her life. And so he's committed to, it's not only a business for him to make money, but he's committed and believes in his product and can help a lot of people. And so that's what we also advocate for. We also believe that maybe something like medicinal marijuana needs more research, and I think that the world is becoming more and more open to that.
I hope so. I do hope so.
It was so interesting what you sent me, an article that the UK is the largest exporter. I had no idea about that. It was
so. Legally, we are the biggest exporter and importer for applications for medical marijuana. But it fascinated me, considering we are one of the slowest countries to get anything sort of on the move. It's still a massive taboo. Articles every day that some sort of stigma around it. Like the other day, there was an article that said that people that smoke weed had a higher risk of self-harming. However, when you actually read the article, it was people that already had chronic depression.
That, I guess, that article was trying to find a non-existent correlation between, because it does the opposite. I would think that, and from anecdotal, that if you take marijuana, it calms you. So sometimes correlation is not causation, right? And so it's for groups that oppose legalization of marijuana, they'll find whatever they can to to harm the image of medical marijuana. Larry left a legacy also with cycling. I know we've been covering more medical marijuana, but the cycling part, one thing I remember, and I've cycled more because of Larry, but one thing I remember that he said is that being on a bicycle made him feel free. It gave him a freedom that nothing else gave him. And so the cycling part was also key to his mood, to him being in such a, having such a great sense of humor. And it's inspiring.
Final question I wanted to ask you was, obviously, as we were saying, with the UK being one of the biggest exporters and importers of weed, with COVID, one of my articles, I don't know if you've read it or not, there is research into cannabinoids and extracting cannabinoids as a vaccination for COVID. So when a patient goes from the severe to critical stage during COVID, and that's obviously where it becomes fatal, they enter something called a cytokine storm, if I'm saying that correctly. It basically puts your organs under inflammatory pressure. Cannabinoids like CBD, certain cannabinoids, they found 3 strains so far that are seeming successful, are actually anti-inflammatory and can stop a patient getting into that fatal stage. So hopefully this will see us, medical marijuana propelled if it is necessary for this pandemic. However, what I wanted to ask you was, do you believe in legalization, as in medical marijuana becomes the country's product rather than it being the people's product and it being decriminalized?
I think that marijuana, for the most part, is inexpensive. At least in the US and the dispensaries that we got to see. And that is why some people would say that pharmaceuticals are not interested, because they cannot sell it for a higher profit, because marijuana is actually inexpensive to produce than making more complex formulas of medications. And of course, I'm saying all this as a filmmaker. I'm not I also studied journalism and communication science. That's my university major. So this was more doing an investigative as we were doing the documentary. So from that, I would say that I think it would be very mainstream. I think that the more it becomes legalized, and I think the UK is probably not too far from happening. I cannot imagine the UK lasting too long without getting marijuana legalized. But I think that it would be mainstream access, like what it's happening in the US. Anyone can just go to a dispensary and get it. There's all range of prices depending on the product. Of course, there's some high-end mixes, but I mean, entry-level products are just very affordable.
I mean, medical marijuana is legal in the UK and has been since 2018, but loads of people don't know it. A lot of people, it's very hard to get it. Obviously, I'm sure it's the same in America. We have CAN cards, which there's a cannabis card, a license for us to be able to get it. But it's still very unknown by so many people. And it was propelled by a little boy who needed medical marijuana. Our NHS doesn't particularly like giving out medical marijuana, and they would prefer their patients to import it from other countries. And now Brexit has completely halted that for a lot of people. So hopefully we will see a quicker step into legalization, because 1, COVID, 2, there's people that need it, and with Brexit, and 3, we are very slow behind the rest of you guys.
Yeah, well, maybe in that, but I think that what you're saying, medical marijuana helping with COVID, I think that has a huge potential of getting media attention. And I had not heard that.
Yeah, human trials are still needed. I will put that in. There is a lot of process.
I bet. No, I bet there's more study needed, but I think that it should still get some attention from the media, and I had not heard it anywhere.
There is so much going on, and there is so little being said about it.
Those that are kind of like were pioneers in pushing this, after a couple of years, they're actually becoming stronger advocates. They have their companies, and they're making a difference. Of course, there's still struggling with laws, because in the US, even though at a state level, a lot of states have marijuana for recreational medical use legal, there's still at a federal level, there's still the Controlled Substances Act, which prohibits it. So it's kind of an interesting structure. Of course, right now, President Biden has many more things on the table to worry about than this, but the Controlled Substance Act at a federal level has been around since 1970. It was signed by Richard Nixon. It's 50 years and it's still there. It's going to change soon. I'm sure once, Biden deals with other bigger priorities, I'm sure that's going to be another topic there. And but yeah, I think it's what you're doing is admirable, and you're like a pioneer, and I really wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's been an absolute honor to speak to you and hear about Larry and Ride with Larry.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Come in.
Good to see you. How you feeling?
It's been a bit of a rough week.
Really? And the best way to take it is put it under your tongue and rub it in your cheek. Don't do too much. You're going to be asleep all afternoon. You know what you should do?
No.
Don't try to communicate. Just relax. See what happens.
We know from animal experiments that the endogenous cannabinoid system is very important in regulating motor activity, that very type of activity that is impaired in Parkinson's disease. From animal experiments, we also know that boosting certain branches of the endocannabinoid system is helpful in relieving symptoms of Parkinson's. Finally, from anecdotal information, we know that certain patients who smoke marijuana experience relief of their symptoms.
I think you're calmed down.
So quickly.
Isn't that amazing?
He used just a single drop, and his hands afterwards were rock steady, and the dyskinesia left.
It was swing back.
It works most of the time.
In fact, it's. Did you guys eat lunch?
Are you hungry now?
1 a.m. Actually,
A person like me could really use marijuana. It makes me pretty angry that I can't get it in my home state.
The number one frustration that I have is knowing that there is this untapped potential that comes from what marijuana is teaching us to generate new medicines, and being stuck because of financial issues or political issues. That is extremely frustrating.
We now know that medical marijuana controls dyskinesia, and yet it's not available to us.